Welcome into the Husker247 post-game podcast show. I am Mike Shaver, joined by Michael Brunson. We are going to be breaking down Nebraska's 28-10 win over Colorado on Saturday night. The Huskers won against a Power 5, Power 4 non-conference opponent for the first time in a while. Bruns, do you know when the last time they won one of these games? Was it 2016 Oregon?
None of my notes here.
They lost to Oregon in 17. They lost to Colorado in 18. They lost to Colorado in 19. They didn't play a non-conference game in 20. In 2021, they lost to – I don't know who their non-conference game was in 2021. They have a marquee one? They lost to Oklahoma. In 2022, They lost to Oklahoma. In 2023, Colorado. In 2024, they won on Saturday, 28-10 in a game that in a lot of ways felt better at halftime than maybe it did at the end of it. Nebraska led 28-0 at half, did not score in the second half. We'll dive into what happened there. But really, I think, Brunts, we should start on the defensive side of the ball because Nebraska played outstanding. I was thinking about it. I think this is the second lowest scoring game of the DeSure Sanders era at Colorado. They might have had another one where he either barely played or didn't play where they scored less than 10 points. But I know Oregon, they scored 6. So yep. I think it's 6 points against Oregon, 10 against Nebraska, and more against other programs. Just a strong defensive effort from the Huskers. Good game plan from Tony White. And your best players showed up. I mean, Tommy Hill, pick 6. Ty Robinson, sack. Nash Hutmaker, sack. John Bullock was fantastic throughout the game. Mackay Bayer, before he got thrown out by the officials, fantastic throughout the game. MJ Sherman, fantastic. Prince Will Uman Mielen, fantastic. Who am I forgetting? Jamari Butler, fantastic. Just a really strong game all the way throughout.
I mean, even James Williams and Kai Wallen were getting in on the pass rush tonight. I mean, the first, let's say, I mean, the Ramir Johnson touchdown catch notwithstanding, I mean, that first, quarter and a half, I mean, I don't know that you could have, dreamt up a better start for Nebraska. I mean, you go into that game knowing that defense is going to set the tone, and you get a batted ball from Ty Robinson on the first drive. On the second, or on the first play, I think, you get a sack from Ty Robinson to end that possession. You stop him on 4th down on the second drive. Third drive is the Tommy Hill pick. I mean, I don't know that, even if in people's wildest dreams, and I think there was a lot of confidence in Nebraska's locker room that they were going to be able to really get after Colorado. I don't know that you could have drawn it up much better than what Nebraska started in that first, like I said, 20 minutes of football. Like it was just, everything was clicking. Even, offensively, Dante Dowdell was getting downhill very quickly on Colorado's defense. Brian Buccini pins Colorado deep to set up the pick 6. I mean, it was the complimentary football that we saw last week, and kind of turned the knob a little bit more and gave you a little bit more of it. I mean, that was basically the feeling in those first quarter and a half. It's like, man, this is, you're kind of in the back of your head, you're thinking 52-7, like it was in 1992. I mean, that's the way it started for Nebraska.
Yeah. And, maybe they could have gotten there with a little bit cleaner of a second half, but really strong play throughout defensively. I keep going back to this, Brunts. The strength of this team, I felt like coming into the year, was going to be its defensive line. And they just, we expected them to play really well against Colorado. We expected that it would be a matchup advantage against that offensive line. But all 4 of their, nominal starters on that defensive line had a sack by the second quarter. I mean, they dominated throughout. Like a guy like MJ Sherman had 3 hurries in addition to his 1 sack today. Ty Robinson deflected a pass, as you mentioned. He had a sack. He blocked a kick. I mean, we were joking like he needed an interception and a forced fumble to completely fill out the box sheet for Nebraska's statistics defensively. Like, you're just getting these really, really strong performances. Jamari Butler was fantastic on Saturday as well. I mean, he had a sack. He was involved in a lot of things. I mean, and then here's the other thing. I mean, these guys did this while for a large chunk of the game, they were, to put it mildly, being held. So to have that kind of performance speaks volumes to what they have there on that defensive line. I mean, they are going to face much less explosive offenses that are probably going to have better offensive lines and better run games. But Nebraska has a defensive line, Brunts, for the first time in a long time that I feel like can sort of dictate the game in a way that they can really benefit from. Like, they're set up really well to go into conference play if this defensive line can stay at a high level. I really do believe that. And it goes beyond the defensive line. I mean, I think Brian Christopherson gave him a game ball, but we were all really impressed by what John Bullock was doing throughout the game on Saturday night.
Yeah, and, pretty much all off season. I mean, you go back to last spring or earlier in the spring, we were writing stories about Nebraska trying to develop a 4-man pass rush because, I mean, as good as Nebraska was defensively last year, they did have to get exotic at times with pressures to try to force the issue with opposing offenses. And, all spring they talked about it. They talked about it in fall camp. How can we basically rush forward and get home and be disruptive? And, Nebraska did have to commit pressure, to force the issue tonight with Colorado to a degree. They didn't as much last week against UTEP, but in the rewatch, I think what you're going to find is it's going to be a lot of guys up front with four, the four basically winning one-on-ones. I mean, that was Nash Hupmaker's sack was just beating an interior lineman up the field and getting to Shedeur Sanders. And, the thing that I thought that they did particularly well this year that they maybe didn't as much last year is they wanted to keep him in the pocket. They didn't want him to do the drifting stuff. They didn't want him to roll out and escape. And, I thought, there were a couple times when he got loose a little bit and made some nice throws, but I thought they did a really good job of, not only were they, pinning their ears back, but they were doing it in a controlled way where they weren't allowing him to bleed out and extend plays and kind of expose the back half of that Nebraska secondary.
Yeah, sticking with this defensive line, I mean, obviously you didn't expect Colorado to really run the ball on Saturday night, and yet they had 20 total carries. Some of that were just the sacks that Sanders ended up taking. Mm-hmm. But 20 carries, 16 yards. I mean, Nebraska's defensive front did a number to whatever Colorado wanted to do. I thought it was super telling that when everyone knew that Colorado was going to run or it was a 4th and short, both times Nebraska just blew that up. And they weren't even close. Like, you didn't even see the officials have to hem and haw and bring out like the sticks to see where the ball was. On the second one in particular, John Bullock was like in the backfield almost ready to take the ball away from the quarterback, on the handoff. Like, they diagnose stuff really well. They hold up well at the point of attack. I mean, it's a really good defensive line. I'm really excited to see, as we get into this Big Ten schedule, what they can kind of do to some of these teams and really how they can make some teams play one-dimensional. And it wasn't just the defensive line. I mean, I think the secondary played well overall, and they kind of, had to for Nebraska to have success on Saturday. But if someone told you before this game Sanders was going to finish with 240 yards and Colorado was going to do it on 57%, passing completion percentage, you would have taken that every time without even knowing about the interception or even that he would only have one touchdown pass in this game. It was just a really strong performance throughout by that defense.
Yeah, the defense's approach is fascinating, and I think two things can be true. I legitimately believe that Nebraska's roster, for the most part, has bought into Matt Rhule preaching the nameless, faceless opponent thing. And, I think that kind of allowed them to block out a lot of the noise that was kind of around this game. I mean, you got Bud Crawford out there throwing passes on the field before the game. You've got, Deion Sanders over there. You've got T.O. over there. You got Warren Sapp over there. There's a lot that kind of goes on around everything. And I thought they did a tremendous job of blocking that out. At the same time, after talking to some of Nebraska's players after the game, especially the defensive players, I think that there was a little bit of extra motivation for this game, given how last year played out, given the narratives around the explosiveness of Colorado's offense. And they are. I mean, they have very good skill position players. But I think that this defense, whether they will admit it publicly, went into this game tonight feeling like they had a point to prove, that they could go in there and dominate a game. And, I think for the most part they did that. And they tackled well. I was kind of tracking the big play stuff during the game. And Colorado finished with 5 big plays in through the air. Their longest pass play was 30 yards. So, I think they answered the bell. I mean, I really think that this is a defense that's going to be really fun to watch. And if they're able with that front 4 to get pressure with just those 4, I mean, I think they're going to be really, really tough to score on in the Big Ten. I mean, you just kind of look at what's left, between now and like Ohio State, and they have a chance to really kind of assert their will on people.
Careful. The Hoosiers put up 77 against the
I know.
Western Illinois, I think Leathernecks.
Yeah, I'm not. This is not a Tom Allen bulletin board situation. I mean, I think Nebraska.
Well, Tom Allen's gone.
I know, but
I see what you're doing. Yeah.
Even the smallest slight can end up on a bulletin board. I get that, but I mean, I do think this is and it's a defense that I don't know that they haven't played their best football. I mean,
right.
You look at, there were multiple possessions where you had, James Williams is more of an every down player now. And he was called for an offsides where I'm pretty sure he just timed up the snap too well. Like it was that was the kind of penalty. I mean, you could have probably called holding on about, I know you can do that on about any play, but especially tonight. I mean, Nebraska was just tearing after Shedeur Sanders. And, it got kind of laughable in the second half how bad some of those holds were, but that's the potential they have. I mean, they said at the start of the season they want to get to 40 sacks this year. They were short of that last year. I think that they've got the potential to get that this year.
Let's talk offense. Nebraska put up 21 points offensively. Really struggled in the second half to consistently move the ball. Things were really disjointed. You mentioned holding as it related to Colorado. They weren't called for it as much as Nebraska was in today's game, which is fascinating. But nevertheless, I mean, you have to play with what your officiating is, and Nebraska just wasn't either able to stay out of its own way or create much in the second half. But in the first half, we saw again, Bruns, Dante Dowdell seems like he's just going to be the guy for Nebraska at that running back position. And let me preface that with Ramirez is going to get his too, but Ramirez is in such a special situation, and they like him a lot, but they clearly trust him as a third down running back, as a guy to pick up blitzes, as a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield, as someone that they can maybe catch defenses who might think that it's going to be a pass because they're in the shotgun. They have Ramirez back there. I like what that picture looks like. I like how those two can kind of play off of each other. And there's more burst to Dante Dowdell than I realized. I mean, he effortlessly hurdled a guy in the middle of the field today. Now, the officials took that play and made it not count, as they did with many others. But there's a lot to like in the potential of what a Dante Dowdell running game can look like and how that could open up things for Nebraska. A lot of work in progress. I'll be curious if teams do what Colorado did tonight. I mean, Nebraska did not play well when Colorado just decided they were going to shoot its gun and go full run blitz heavy throughout the second half. And I don't know if it was a case of Nebraska didn't want to challenge vertically, if they didn't want to just put Dylan Raiola in that situation, or whatever it was, but they did not have much in the way of answers for the Colorado run blitzes, or even just their blitzing in general. I mean, I thought it was probably the first time in the two games so far, Raiola looked uncomfortable in some moments in the second half. And Nebraska, I think, finished with just like 70 yards, I think, total in the second half as well. So a lot to be worked on, but that's good. That's kind of honestly maybe the best way this could have went, is that you get this win against Colorado. It is cathartic in a lot of ways, and you're able to enjoy it, but there's going to be a lot they can see on film as they go forward into this Northern Iowa game that they can sort of help themselves try to become better offense overall.
Yeah, it's an interesting split. So I got the second half splits in front of me. So they had 121 yards in the second half, 62 on the ground, 59 through the air, and 9 penalties for 80 yards in the second half.
Must have been what I was thinking of.
They had, the Ramir Johnson play was wiped out. Ja'Cory Barney had another long one that was wiped out. It was like there was like this strange thing going on where holding was only being called between like the linebackers and the secondary, and not like around the lines. And,
other than very specifically on the Ramir play,
yes,
about 40 yards away from where it was relevant.
Yes.
And that one, I will say, of most of the calls, that one I could honestly say was probably the closest to being relevant, but still.
Yeah. No, I mean, Nebraska was 0 for 6 on third downs in the second half. I think your point that you made about just kind of the takeaway from this, I mean, it's in some ways, it's kind of like the coach's dream, right? Like you play just fantastic football in the first half. There's going to be a lot to learn from in the second half. Like there was enough that happened in that game that guys can feel good about, but also when it's film session time on Sunday or Monday, when they go through it, there's going to be some things in that second half. You're like, okay, we need to do this better. And Matt Rhule talked about this after the game, and I think there's a little bit of truth to it. Nebraska's got to figure out how to play with a lead. Like this is not something that they've done often. It's not something that they've like done well. I mean, I think back to last year. I mean, even the games that they won in the midpoint of the year, it didn't look great. When they were ahead, and today, I mean, they had a 5-minute advantage in time of possession in the second half. They didn't turn the ball over. I mean, I think there were some things there that are okay because you have the defense that you do, like they didn't put the ball in a bad spot for the most part. Colorado never really had kind of one of those opportunities for a really big game-changing play. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that you can probably take away and learn from that second half. At the same time, I think they also did an okay job of just offensively kind of keeping it between the lines and keeping it on the road,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's more good than bad that comes out of this game, but it's definitely an opportunity to put some film up and see where they can get better. I think the offensive line is not going to walk away from that second half feeling like they did their job. And there's a lot that can be improved upon there as you try to build that running game, because you're going to want to be able to put teams away by giving the ball to Dowdell and actually creating space. You can move forward with it. Real quickly, Bruns, as we're about to wrap things up here, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Nebraska special teams. Another mixed bag from the third phase for the Huskers. You had a blocked field goal from Ty Robinson. He said he almost blocked a second one. The ball went right by his head.
Mm-hmm.
He just didn't get his head in the way in time, I guess. And so that was nice early in the game. And then Brian Buschini, who I have been less than kind to in particular because of how poor I felt like last year went for someone that I had high expectations for. had a really strong game. I mean, he hit some big punts, flipped the field, stuck them inside their 15 twice, stuck them inside their 5 once. Directly, I think, led to that Tommy Hill interception touchdown for Nebraska in the first quarter. A great performance for Buschini. But then we get into what didn't go well, and it's everything from the coverage unit. Very first kickoff after you score, you're giving up a 60-yard return, and you have guys all out of sorts. You had a punt blocked, a missed field goal. There was a kickoff from Colorado at one point that landed between 3 Huskers. No one caught it. You had to have someone dive on the ball, and you give up 8 yards of field position instead of an up back catching that, waving for a fair catch. You just did not have a very clean third phase. And really, some of it you can live with, but I don't know how anyone over there can remotely have any confidence in their kicking game. Tristan Alvano missing that field goal, which I think was like a 37-yarder, just had to wipe away whatever possible confidence you could have in your kicking game. Like that's not a great spot to be in when you know that you're going to play some tight games coming up.
Yeah, it's a concern. I mean, I think it definitely is. We talk about an offense that, was still kind of trying to find its footing a little bit. You need to at least be able to count on 3 points if you're in the neighborhood of it. And, I think he's still probably working his way back a little bit more from injury than what's maybe been, what Matt Rhule has said. But at the same time, like, that's something that needs to get buttoned up. I mean, you have a pretty high potential for playing some one-score games as you get into Big Ten play. That's a concern. I mean, I'm more concerned about that than the other things. I mean, Colorado's kind of a tough team to play special teams wise, because I think they started playing the way that Nebraska did with, they like a good high kick that falls at the 2. That's exactly where John Hull put it. And, Colorado's, skill guys did what they did. So you saw a little bit of an adjustment on the next kick. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that continues to be a concern going forward is, do you have somebody that can go in there and make you kicks? Because, I mean, even, the miss tonight, I mean, it didn't end up hurting Nebraska, but it's a little bit of a momentum thing. Like, that would have put them up. I think at the time they were up 14-0. They would have put them up 17-0. I mean, it's a little bit of a different game. You don't kind of get the doubt creeping in, but that's I think you have to give a lot of credit to Brian Buschini, because I think for 2 games he's hit the ball really well. And that punt that kind of set up the Tommy Hill pick, that was a really big one. To kind of get the momentum back and get Nebraska's defense in a good spot. Nebraska, by the way, won the starting field position battle again.
2 in a row.
Yeah. Nebraska started throwing 34, Colorado throwing 27. So that's progress. That's not a category that Nebraska's won very much over the last 5 or 6 years.
No, it is not. All right, to finish things off, going to read a few comments from the message board. Appreciate everybody who gave their reaction to Nebraska, Colorado. Just going to run through a few of these here. Dodge Viper 04, just relieved. I put a lot on this game, and I was emotionally drained after the first quarter. Was waiting for the other shoe to drop. So glad when all zeros came up and we had won. That was kind of a common theme for us throughout the game thread. I think, Nebraska gets up 28-0. Colorado has this potential quick strike offense, and then you're just not adding to the lead at all in the second half. There's definitely a few people on the board who were convinced that Nebraska and its losing ways were about to rear its head.
There was some clinching. I think that's fair to say. A little clinching, a little clinchy.
All right, what else we got here? Old BCS computer. Defense answered the call big time, dominated every aspect. Offense was fine. A couple second half phantom holdings go away, and people probably feel better. Seemed like the game plan was to get the ball out quick and prevent any mistakes from Briola. We won, so can't complain, but would have liked to see some more rhythm here. Overall, a win is a win. Let's go 1-0 next week. 90s born Husker. It's nice to have a quarterback that can overcome both questionable play calls and bad officiating. I'm a broken record with this. I don't really feel like the play calls were that bad. I mean, some of it is Nebraska's going against a 9-man box every now and then, and they clearly were not interested in trying to attack vertically, which we could get into that conversation too. But honestly, if some of the calls go another way, they had some big plays dialed up. They just didn't either hit on them, or they were just taken off the board by officiating.
I love that. I love the play that was
the Barney play,
just off of Jalen Lloyd's fingertips.
Oh, that one, yeah, in the first quarter.
Yeah, that was really nice. And I'm still a little confused as to how that didn't that was made to hit.
Yeah. Well, he got his hands on it. I don't know if he alligator armed it or what. I mean, I think if you asked Jalen, he would probably think that he should catch that ball, 10 out of 10 times, and it just didn't. It didn't happen there for him. But yeah, that's one of those that you certainly would have liked. Greek Freak said made a bad team look bad without needing Raiola, which is true. I mean, that's one of the things about this win is this defense can carry this team. Like, you have the 5-star quarterback, you have some offensive playmakers, but if Nebraska gets in one of these sort of, we would call them Big Ten West slap fights, they have a team. The Big Ten West is gone. They have a team that was built to be very, very competitive in that horrible, horrible division.
The Big Ten is dead. Long live the Big Ten. That kind of a thing. Yeah, Big Ten West.
That kind of thing.
Yep.
Definitely that kind of thing. Cornhusker Odysseus. Some of this I just like to say people's names to see if I'm saying it correct. Message me if I'm completely wrong. I think this is the defense's best performance under Tony White, taking into account quality of competition. How do you feel about that one, Brooks?
It's hard to argue. I mean, yeah. I mean, we were. I mean, going into the game, we were talking about how this was going to be probably the best quarterback they were going to see until Ohio State, right?
Yeah, I agree. And the only other game I can think of is that Maryland, I thought, had a really good offense for the most part last year, and Nebraska had them shut down almost the entirety of that game. And then, of course, when you needed that final stop, you couldn't get off the field.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people in the comments on the Hypecast, they were talking about how Colorado was just going to run up and down the field on Nebraska. So, I mean, so it goes.
Shout out the commenters.
We don't need to read those. We don't need to read those comments.
You're welcome to come back and comment some more and tell us how wrong we're going to be.
Yeah.
You're always welcome. Fully husked. It feels like this team actually believes in itself, keeps stacking wins, and we could be very good. And let's finish with this one from Go Big Bread. An absolute step in the right direction. And I think that's inarguable. Even if you wanted this game to go a little bit better, Nebraska covered the spread. They doubled the spread, nearly tripled the spread. Could have scored more, probably should have scored more. Ultimately walked away with an 18-point win. 2-0 for the first time since 2016. Northern Iowa next week. Things feel a little different around here, Brunts.
It's weird. Sun's going to be a little bit brighter in the morning, Mike.
Birds are going to sing a little louder.
You're just going to be singing, chirping. It's going to be a great day at the apple orchards here in the area. Great.
Yeah, I mean, apple orchards sound nice, but NFL Week 1 tomorrow is calling my name. That and what should be a bevy of recruiting reaction. We had somebody who wanted to kind of us to dive into that. I don't know that we have a lot of time here to do that, but I'm excited to hear what the recruits had to say. I know that they were going to love that atmosphere. I don't know who wouldn't have loved that atmosphere. Even before the game, you could kind of feel that mixture of and excitement, enthusiasm, and that little tension that creeps in because there's the big football game on the way. Be exciting to hear what the recruits have to say after that. And who knows, maybe Nebraska will be adding to their 2025 or future classes as well as early as this weekend or this week. So we'll see all of that. You can get all of that coverage at Husker247.com. Brunch, you have anything you want to leave the people with?
No, it's 1:15 in the morning. I'm ready to work a little bit and then hit the sack here, I think.
What late night football game is still being televised right now?
I need to get an update on Oregon State and San Diego State. That might still be going on.
He needs an update, folks. He needs it. He needs it like he needs air.
Give me the updates.
All right, everybody. Be sure to check out what we got going on at Husker247.com. For Michael Bruntz, I'm Mike Schaefer. We are Husker247. I'll be back on Sunday with a Sunday side session joined by Connor Happer. We'll have more podcasts throughout next week. And, of course, plenty of coverage at Husker247.com.